Hi, this is William for Great Affordable Watches, and today I'm gonna talk about what I think are the best affordable vintage watches you can get. And of course, this is just my opinion, and there are a lot of great vintage watches in this price range, but these are just my personal favorites. And the two watches I have in front of me are the Seiko Lordmatic lineup. And I have two Lordmatics, and I'm gonna tell you why I have two of them later in this video. But overall, Seiko Lordmatics are among my absolute favorite watches, and especially in this price range, they offer tremendous value for your money. They have great quality, they have great movements, and a very interesting history, which I'm gonna touch on very briefly. And we can start off with some history. In the 1960s, Seiko produced the Lord Marvel lineup, and they contained the in-house high beat movement from Seiko manual wind. And the Lord Marvel movement, I think it's called the 5740, was a high beat movement beating at 36,000 beats per hour, which was very impressive. And the watches themselves looked gorgeous. And a bit later, I think in the late 60s and especially the early 70s, Seiko produced the Lordmatic lineup. And the Lordmatic lineup was basically a mid to high-end range of Seikos, just below King Seikos in quality and finishing. And as I'm gonna show you later, and I'm gonna talk about the quality of these watches are almost as good as King Seikos. They are not as good as King Seikos, but they are very close. As most of you guys probably know, King Seikos was a high-end range of Seiko watches, and they were below Grand Seikos, but many people say that some King Seiko watches was even better, especially when it comes to the movements, than some of the Grand Seiko watches. And the movements in these watches are very special, and I'm gonna talk about that later. But let's start off with the first watch, and that's the left one. This is the Seiko Lordmatic 5707 7071. And this is a Lordmatic with the movement 5606 from Suva. And when it comes to Seiko watches from this time period, the 70s and 60s, there were two competing Seiko factories, the Suva factory and the Daini factory. And they were basically competing in-house, and they were trying to make the absolute best mechanical movement they could before the quartz crisis ended the race. Even though these two watches were Seikos, they are very different, and especially when it comes to the design of the movement. And gonna put some pictures up on the movement itself. But this movement, the 5606, is basically the same movement as the movement on a lot of King Seikos and Grand Seikos, but you can get these watches a lot cheaper than those watches. The biggest difference is the beat rate. The beat rate is 21,600 beats per hour in this movement, and on King Seikos and Grand Seikos, the movement were beating at 28,800 beats per hour. But the movements in this one, the King Seikos and Grand Seikos, were all based on the same design, so the foundation of the movement is basically the same. They just changed some parts of the movement to compensate for the higher beat rates. But as I said, the design is the same, so you can say it's basically the same movement, but unregulated and lower grade. Many people say that the 5606 were among the best movements Seiko have ever produced, and the same can be said for the movement in this one, which we'll talk about in a second. But the 5606 was a fantastic movement from Seiko, and it was probably in the pinnacle of watchmaking in this era. And these movements were basically beating Swiss movements in the same time period, and they were even kicked out of the competition. And that's how good these movements were. And the quality of the watch overall is a step below King Seiko's, as I said, but overall the finishing on the case and on the watch itself is just fantastic. And to get a vintage watch of this caliber with a high-end movement from Seiko, yes, this is a high-end movement, for around $200, I think that's just incredible. Overall, I must say I just love the design and the finishing of this watch. King Seiko's offers extremely good value for money as well, and that's probably one of my favorite watches in that price range. But to get a watch with basically the same movement and not as high grade for this kind of money, I think that's just incredible. And as I said, they are a bit in the shadow of the bigger brother King Seiko's. That's why I think not many people know about these watches. I guess to Seiko enthusiasts, they know about this lineup for sure, but to most people I think this is a pretty unknown lineup from Seiko. And I don't know if the movement from Suva or Diani is the best, so I thought I get one from each factory, and this is the Seiko Lormatic 5216 7040, I think the reference number on this one is, and this is a Seiko Lormatic Special, and this contains the high beat movement, the 5216, and it beats at 28,800. And this is also a high-end movement from Seiko, and some people say that the movement in this watch and the 52 lineup in general is among the absolute best movements ever produced from Seiko. Even though, as I said, these are from the same company, the design of the movements are very different, and they don't share many similarities between each other. I can leave a link down in the description for some more information, more in-depth information. But the movement of this one, as I said, the 5216 is the same family as most King Seikos, with the King Seiko's 52 lineup. And this is also a unregulated and low-grade version of the movements in the King Seikos. But the design and the foundation of the movement are the same between the Lormatic and the King Seikos. And you can get this watch for around $200 as well. These two watches are a bit more rare than most Lormatics, but they are pretty easy to come by if you are looking for them. The design of this watch is very similar to a lot of King Seikos. It almost looks the same as many King Seikos, and you can basically say that this is a baby King Seiko because the case and the movement itself shares a lot of similarities with them, but for a much lower price. Both these watches are around 35-36 millimeters, so they are not that small either, which is great. So if you have a 7-inch wrist, you can pull these watches off very easily. But overall, I love Seiko Lormatics and King Seikos for that matter, and I think both King Seikos and Lormatics offer extremely good value for your money, and getting a high-end Seiko movement for around $200 is just incredible in my opinion. And I think they look amazing as well, and Lormatics in general are pretty cheap. You can get cheaper Lormatics with the same movement than this one. This is the special version, so this is a bit harder to get. So if you're looking for a incredible vintage watch for a bargain, I think the Lormatics are the perfect watch. And these watches have great quality, great finishing, and fantastic movements, and a lot of history behind them. So I think this is just the complete package, and I think prices may go up on these watches as when more people find out about them, and because right now, as I said, they are a bit in the shadow of King Seikos. So get them while they are very, very cheap. Of course, I'm gonna do a wrist shot on both of these watches so you can see how it wears on my 7-inch wrist. And I know many people ask, this is a Here's Forest strap, 80 millimeters, and on this one it's actually the original bracelet, as we can see here. It says Lordmatic LM Seiko, and I must say I'm really impressed by these bracelets. It's a kind of mix between a Jubilee and a regular bracelet, so it's very comfortable, and I think it's a pretty fun to have a original bracelet for a vintage watch. But as I said, let's now do a wrist shot. Okay, here it is, and I just think these watches are fantastic, and I think it's really fun to share something like this, as I see too little talk about Lordmatics, and even King Seikos are not that well known to most people outside the watch community, and I can highly recommend both Lordmatics and King Seikos and Lord Marvels for that matter, because Lord Marvel watches, Lord Marvel are amazing as well. They look fantastic. I think these are great watches for the price you are paying for them, and there are a lot of different models and case shapes and sizes and all that, so there is something for everyone, I think. Okay, let's take a look at the other watch. I think this sits fantastically on my wrist as well. Yes, they are pretty small for today's standard, but 35-36 millimeters are still very variable for a average wrist. And I think now when sizes are going down, I think small watches will become more popular. I think that's a great thing. So, what do you guys think of these watches? Have you heard about them before? And do you like them? Just let me know what you think about these watches down in the comment section. It would be very interesting to see what you guys think about these watches, and I think this was a very fun video for me to do, because I really love these watches, and I think Seikos in general are probably among my absolute favorite watches. And unfortunately, the Sorb 17 or the Seiko Alpinist is now discontinued, and I think most people have heard about that by now, but that's a bit of a shame. So luckily you can pick up these fantastic watches instead of the Seiko Alpinist. But Seiko will probably do a follow-up to the Seiko Alpinist, and hopefully it will be announced now at Baselworld. Okay, if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more watch-related content. And please let me know if you want to see more vintage related videos. Just let me know down in the comment section. Okay, thanks for watching, and I hope I see you on the next one. Bye.